Well, I guess to kind of start off, it's been 60 years since Giant. When you get to showcase this film and you get to talk about not only what you were able to go back and capture, but also when you talk about Giant, how nostalgic are you about, growing up in an area not too far from there? And I know you talked about your father experienced a lot of that segregation that you didn't. Can you talk to us a little bit about growing up, knowing about it, but not necessarily having to fight exactly like your dad did?
Well, it's funny because they didn't have the tools to fight. So they really didn't until our generation in the 60s and 70s and 80s, is when we really started to fight. There had been some previous civil rights movements like GI Forum that Hector P. Garcia started in Corpus Christi for GIs, traditional organizations like LULAC, League of United Latin American Citizens, but there really wasn't a way that society, that George Stevens captured the conditions that were happening on film that Edna Ferber had written about, 3 years prior. When they did the screenplay, they included a lot of what Edna Ferber had seen, but he changed a lot of it, made it even stronger. That wasn't in the book, in the original Giant that Edna Ferber wrote. But I was young when that movie was filmed in 1955. I was born in 53, so I was 2 years old. So I had heard about it growing up, and I heard about Marfa, the place, but I really didn't know much about the film itself until later, when I was in college, and then I would see it like on a late night. I'd see clips of it and stuff to when I finally saw it, and it amazed me. It just, I said, wow, here's a film that was screened all over America in 1956 with themes that had never been seen before that were extremely controversial. Edna Ferber, when she wrote that book, and she was not welcome to Texas anymore. She caricatured the people, but she did capture how Mexican Americans were treated at the time. And it wasn't pleasant. See, we were under Jim Crow laws the way African Americans were under Jim Crow laws in the South. But there weren't that many African Americans in the Southwest. We were the ones that took the brunt of it in all aspects, whether it was, housing or, public accommodations, movie theaters, swimming pools, total segregation to where Mexican Americans had to live a separate life, completely segregated from Anglo society. And economically, of course, usually it was poor, because you didn't have those same Anglo opportunities. George Stevens captured that, in an amazing way. He changed some things that Edna Ferber wrote in the novel to make them stronger, such as the Angel Obregón scene, where Angel comes back. And in the book, Angel comes back as a hero and a rebel and a Pachuco. Pachucos were the early rebels in the Latino community. The way they would dress, the way they would talk, the way they would dance. They were zoot suiters, and they were on the fringes of the Latino community. I mean, your mother would tell you, what, you want to grow up and be a Pachuco? Because they were always, somebody that pushed the limit. Well, George Stevens didn't have him come back as a Pachuco. He had him come back in a coffin as a war hero. But what he showed was that here are these people, in World War II sacrificing their lives and dying for a country that treats them like second-class citizens. And that's what he was trying to get across, and he brought it on so beautifully, so well done. And that's why I include that in my documentary. I include that scene and what people are saying about how he captured it. It took a long time to film. Another one that he changed was the confrontation scene with Sarge in the diner. There was no scene like that in the book. There were mentions of people not being served in a restaurant and so forth, but no scene where the protagonist, which is Rock Hudson, the Big Benedict character, transforms and defends the people that he was a racist against, which is now his daughter-in-law and his grandson. Now he defends them against a racist restaurant owner, which is an amazing thing. And then, of course, the very end scene.
Yeah.
And in The Giant, George Stevens ends the movie with a shot of a blonde-haired little girl in the crib next to her brother, who is very dark, Mexican American, and actually that wasn't her brother, that was Earl Hallman's character, Bob Dace.
Exactly.
That was his daughter.
Yeah.
And that was Dick Benedict's daughter that Bob was married to, Bob Dace and Earl Hallman, who I just spoke to the other day. He called me yesterday, as a matter of fact, that he's been getting a lot of fan mail, and that he wanted to know if the movie was available. And I told him it was on Amazon and Shop PBS, because he's been getting letters. I mean, if you're my age, you saw Earl Hallman every week on Policewoman on TV. You know, when we used to watch TV in our living rooms at home, like in the old days. He was there. And it was, to me, it was so amazing since I grew up with him as a television star, to see him in person. And now to be friends with him on the phone and stuff like that. It's just great.
I'm curious, can you talk a bit about where, because I know the inspiration came more from wanting to cover the Blackwell School and the segregation part of it. When did you realize, I need to tackle the whole story? When was that aha moment, like, I need to tackle the movie?
Well, when I was doing research on Blackwell and segregated school and their effort to try to create a Texas historical site, you know, you go around Marfa and they have plaques and little rooms that are museums, and people remember when Marfa came through, and the actual people that I was interviewing, the Mexican Americans that were segregated at the time, talked about it all the time, because many of them were either extras in the movie or witnesses of what was going on. And one of the characters that I was talking to became a fan club of James Dean, started a fan club. And so it was very much part of their own history. And so I started to really take a strong look. I was going to mention it. I never was. There's no way you can mention Marfa and its history without mentioning Giant. But to the degree that I started to see how it affected the people, because the interesting thing is that George Stevens had an open set. So by having an open set, that meant the community came together to view the filming that was going on. And they were at their best behavior. But they would never come together like that. They were separate communities. And the cast and crew didn't know that. They didn't know that community was segregated. It was even a major surprise to Elsa, who played the Mexican wife of Dennis Hopper in the movie. You know, she's from Mexico. They didn't have that. They have their own problems, but not that. So they would all come together and be together while the filming was going on. So it was like a little community. But that's what made me start looking at it more deeply. Then I started going back and looking at those scenes, and then looking at the story again, and starting to see the similarities of what George Stevens was trying to do. And of course, George Stevens, that was new. It was new, and it's controversial, and of course his World War II experience, everything that he saw, from the concentration camps to some of the worst, aftermath of the battles. As a matter of fact, a lot of the color film that we see at World War II is his.
Yeah.
It did change him, and so I think he was drawn to that conflict because it was real. Of course, conflict always makes a good story, right? Controversy.
Yeah.
But this was real, and he captured it. I mean, there's some people that question his use of blackface, really making the Mexicans darker than what they really were through makeup. But I can understand what he was trying to do. I think he was trying to get a reaction, as almost like if you would get from somebody who was actually black at that time, which would have been impossible to see. I think they barely tolerated a Mexican, with an Anglo, not a Mexican wife with an Anglo, during that year. I mean, that decade. But certainly not African American. But I think the blackface, and I say dark makeup because they used to have blackface, in the old days.
Yeah.
And that sort of kind of reminded some critics and some folks in academia and people that see that and are kind of, taken aback by it. Because if you see Elsa, she's very light-skinned and very light eyes.
Yeah.
And very beautiful, of course, still in her age. But she wasn't dark like that. Neither were the people in the restaurants and stuff. They were dark.
It's interesting because, like, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner? I mean, that was years and years later. Even like,
Yeah.
This was pioneering in that sense.
It was. There was one that was called Pinky, but she was African American but looked white.
Yeah.
And so, and she's in love with another African American, but she looks white. But she really was. Well, in the story, she's African American, and they could get away a little bit that way. But this was groundbreaking. It really was. I can just imagine, especially the people in Texas, what they thought when they saw that last scene in Sarge's Diner.
Wow.
But it shows some respect too by the patriarch, the Big Benedict character toward Angel Obregon's family, because a lot of the people that grew up on the ranch, Mexican Americans, they were in a way, even though they were apart, they were like family. They took care of each other because of the hard work, and Mexicans were expert horsemen, vaqueros. I mean, they started the industry down in South Texas, the ranching industry, even all the terms, riata, which is the name of the ranch, riata, which is a lasso.
Yeah.
The what you hit the horse with, riata. Rodeo, chaps, all those words come from that industry. They're all Spanish words.
Does it? When you got to talk with the families, and even before you decided to switch to the full Giant story, how much footage did they have? How many photos? Because I was amazed at how much is in your film. There's a lot.
There's a lot. Well, a lot of them we lucked out with some sources that a lot of people hadn't tapped into, or a lot of the source companies like Corbis or Getty or some of the big ones that I don't want you to know exist, because they corner the market. And if you've done any research with Getty, a lot of their photographs are just excellent, and they're the best, but they're also very pricey. But we were able through our research to discover, like this one. I mean, how many people have seen this photo with John Dean with his two little Mexican kids in Marfa? This one is very, we found the photographer took that, and he had a mountain of photographs on the set. He's actually the photographer that took this photo, was the one that took, what was her name, Norma Jean? All her photos early on before she became Marilyn Monroe.
Wow.
She was just, a kid, and he was photographing her and all kinds of, and he has them, and then of course she became huge. But that, and also private collections, a lot of private photos. Some of the photos, if you notice in the movie, we did a motif because they were shot with very cheap Instamatics or those where the quality is not as good. They weren't professional photos, so we paste them like on scrapbooks.
Yeah.
And do that effect, things like that we did to enhance the experience. I wanted to make the film, both the Blackwell story and Giant sort of like almost in the same time frame, so that a lot of the imagery, like even typewriters and things like that, are from that time period, because they're talking about Blackwell's a school and so forth. But we lucked out with people came forward when they found out, and these were like Anglo ranchers and powers that be who had actual 8mm footage, color, in boxes, attics in place, and then I had it digitized and color corrected and so forth, and then gave them a copy on DVD, and they were happy. You know what I'm saying? And so a lot of people, it's amazing because I've been doing this for a long time, and when it comes to archives, you'd be amazed what people have in their closets. Some of the best material comes in people's personal closets that they have.
What was it like having George Stevens Jr. there? How he seems to have championing this film as well. Like it's opened up the argument for his dad and the greatness of his dad, but also himself and what he's meant to film. Can you talk about interviewing him? And it seems like he opens up in this film as well. He
did open up. He has done a few films tribute to his dad, especially as a war photographer, and I've seen them, some of the documentaries that he's done. And he actually gave me some really good pointers through his own experience. But I don't think he really, until I came around, thought much about the whole Mexican-American side of the story. Just like a lot of people don't. I mean, if you talk about Giant, they say Elizabeth Taylor, Rock Hudson, James Dean, and that's what they remember. They don't remember Juana, and they don't remember Angel or anything like that. And so, but when I started prying him, he did. He started to realize exactly what his father was doing, and he articulated it. And then as he, saw the movie, I think he grew real fond of it. As a matter of fact, he joined us in Los Angeles at the Winter Press Tour, Critics Press Tour, and it was great having him there. And then everything that he's done to support the film through his own contacts, friends to watch, or to help us get some archives, from his dad's collection. He made it possible, really. I mean, we could have done it without interviewing George Stevens Jr., but man, he gave it a whole other dimension.
Yeah,
we had to do it.
Was there an interview where something was revealed where you just were like, what? Or how do I get this in there? Like, this surprised me.
Oh, there was a lot of that. There was a lot of interviews where things were revealed that we either included or it would open a can of worms. That happens. If you're going to get something revealed, you got to follow up on it if you want to go there. If it's part of your story, then you would be remiss not to. If it's something that's very important that makes another aspect of your story seem like untruthful, then you have to follow it. I think that on some of the reveals, we went through and did them. I mean, it's very hard when you barely think that one of the ranch owners, that's going to give you an interview, that you're going to ask them questions like, what's your feeling about the segregated cemetery? I mean, they're on camera. They weren't expecting you to ask that question. They were just going to talk about their relatives' participation in the movie as extras. But when you start talking about the deep feelings, and then they come forth and tell you what they're feeling, to me, it was amazing. And a couple of times people wouldn't answer or walk away. And I was expecting that. But the people did come forth and say things, which was great. I mean, to think that you have a town in today's day and age that still has a fence that's segregated and what it means as a symbol. Yeah. That's tough. And so we talked about that. And it did cause stir in the town among some neighbors, some pro and some con, and who knows what's going to happen there. Something's got to happen. And those people aren't going to just forget it year after year.
Like in our Q&A, you had someone ask about it. It's obviously still passionate. I mean, it's still there. It's right there. I'm most familiar with your work because of Video Fest and BART, like the Chicano stuff, but also PBS. That's been such a great outlet for you. Can you talk about having PBS behind you and working in the struggles of dealing in that documentary world, even though you've hit, the pinnacle there with PBS?
It's tough. I mean, a lot of people think that it's easy to get on PBS. It's probably the hardest network to get on because everybody wants to be on PBS. I mean, it's still the most trusted network. You still have 350 stations nationwide. You get much more penetration than you do in cable. It's not, you still have to struggle more to get outreach out there. People know that you're there, and one of the few places that advertise, you have to say, check your local listings. Worldwide, and worldwide networks, BBC producers, people from all over, they want to be on PBS. And it's taken many years to develop that relationship with them on the national level, because I like to do shows that reach a national audience, but at the same time, the programming that you do, and I've learned this through the years, have to be accessible. I haven't been able to accomplish that internationally. I had to do a version of Children of Giant that was 52 minutes. It had Blackwell cut out. Wow. I mean, I did include Sarge's Diner and scenes like that, but the story of Blackwell has of no interest internationally, because that's American history, and it's, Latino history that I don't care about. Maybe we're the same way. We may not care about their, but we may want to, but if it's, say, African American or something, probably has more interest as American stories to them, but not these stories. And so, same thing goes with PBS. I have to make sure that the stories that I pick are appealing to a wide audience, not just preaching to the choir, as much as I'd like to. I still do anyway sometimes with some other things, but on a national level, you have to create work that people can engage in, and you reach them. You don't want people turning off. It doesn't do any good when they turn the channel. I've heard this. Bitch. When are you going to, No, it's too important. And they have to see it in a way that they can relate. Say, hey, yeah, I understand. Or, like tonight when we saw Children of Giant, it was highly entertaining. I mean, it's got funny moments, engaging moments, new moments, things about making the film that weren't known, new information. Cinephiles would like it, and it's just an experience. Some people feel that, it's another major accomplishment for me, is that it was 90 minutes. You don't see 90-minute shows on on PBS at all, unless it's a major stunt with other ones, but just what's called a one-off 90-minute. And the reason why they let it go, because usually it's an hour, they stick to the hour, it's because the content was so good, and it goes by really fast. It doesn't feel like you're dragging in 90 minutes, and so that was a coup d'etat, dude. It really was. And they loved it. They thought it was great. They left it. Leave it 90. That's good. So that is a major coup d'etat.
That's unheard of, by the way. Yeah, for them to go. Well, I'm curious then, because you teased in the Q&A about what your next project is. Do you mind sharing with us what that is as well? Because I think that's something special.
Sure. No, it's I'm working on of course, next year is election year. I don't want to necessarily date your video in case you want to see it 5 years from now, but it's going to be in 2016 with everything that's going on, especially for the Latino, especially what's happening, more so than ever before. People talking about the importance of the Latino vote. Now they can talk, because there's power there. Power, in terms of electoral, the states that we're in, and electoral votes, in terms of numbers, where you can seize and have power and people take you serious. Immigrations have been on the top issue, even some rhetoric against the culture of people, like Latinos, like, oh, wait a minute, who are, we're just as American as anybody else, and we want everything as American like anybody else. But the next documentary I'm working on is a person who had a vision to where we are today. And he died young, he got cancer, but he was at the forefront of major change that differed from what I was doing at one point, marching in the streets, and protesting and what we knew best, walkouts, sit-ins, demanding, being a radical in education or politics or culture or whatever, or anti-Vietnam even. But he didn't. He decided to, and I'm talking about Willie Velasquez, decided to move into a nonpartisan position, which was hard for somebody that was as radical as he was, and understood the power of the vote, It's the only way you're going to have power. Not marching in the streets or creating third political parties like La Raza Unida, which was an amazing thing that happened. A whole third party. As a matter of fact, I was invited to the White House to show President Clinton the piece that I did on La Raza Unida. And we were watching it in his White House theater, which is amazing to me. I mean, here I am, lowly documentary filmmaker, be sitting next to the most powerful man in the world who's giving you time to watch your piece. That reminded him of when he was in Texas stumping for Humphrey. And he hated La Raza Unida because they were taking votes away from the Democrats. You know, and of course he was a Democrat. And he went off at the end of the screening about how bad Raza Unida was and what they did and blah, blah, blah. And it was an amazing thing to me. So there has been some of those periods, but like I said in there's 26 million of us. Now, you know there's more Latinos in this country than are Canadians in Canada? It's a lot.
Yeah.
And there's also 50,000 Latinos turning 18 every month in this country. So do the math. Already we're the largest minority. And it's not to scare people or because, like I said, we're just as American as everybody else. And that's what I want to show in this piece. You know, show that and people want to come to us. I mean, even Donald Trump says he's going to get the Latino vote. You know, I don't know about that, but
yeah, that might take a lot. Well, talking about the youth, you've also always had young people in your films. You've always brought in students, especially even. Can you talk to young filmmakers, young Latino filmmakers about? You brought up in the Q&A, another thing in the Q&A, the Sean Penn line, and how that showcases just how far we've got the best film of the year, and he's getting this wonderful award, and that's what we throw in just because he's
Mexican.
Yeah.
Now he's actually Mexican from Mexico.
Yeah.
That's what he said. Green card, Sean Penn. But there's a lot of young cats. Some remind me of me, and some don't. So some I recognize, and I try to counsel them. You know that they're probably going to find it difficult, the path they're following, if they don't do certain things. You know, because in my particular case, all I wanted was a door to be open. But once it was open, I was going to prove my way through, and it happened every time. You know, by just giving it all you've got. Especially when you're young, you can't. As you start to get older, you slow down. But I try to find talented first interns from University of Texas that's nearby, or any university really. If I've had people drive from Dallas, you know, weekly. Male, female, Latino, non-Latino. The last intern I had is non-Latino, Patrick Zimmerman, man. He said he learned more sitting next to me, editing, than he did 4 years getting a BA. And he probably did, because I taught him a method on how to handle overwhelming amount of footage and not get overwhelmed. Teach him a method on how to edit. He was helping me because he was a computer geek and I'm old school. And so something goes wrong on a nonlinear and it starts talking. It doesn't talk normally. It says your file is, you know, missing, you know, blah, blah, blah. What the hell does that mean? You know, instead of, you know, so these young people, it's like my kids. They're intuitive. I mean, it's they know it. They grew up with it. Not me. But I'm an editor and I'm very frustrated. I can't move that fast the way I used to on tape. I'd make those things smoke. And I see where their strengths are. You know, who's better in the field, who's a good editor, who's a good assistant editor, who's organized, who's not organized. And then just try to open a world up for them. And it bothers me a little bit sometimes because they all want to be like me. But then at the same time, I can't discourage them. And the reason why it bothers me is because then they leave. After they learn everything that I've taught them, and they're getting real good at it, another game. And some of them will make it, and some of them will decide that it's just really hard, man. The documentary world, I mean, how many outlets do you have? I'm praying and hoping that with the new platforms and new technology and the way television and streaming and everything is changing and shifting, this format's never going to die, but hopefully there'll be more avenues. And hopefully the costs will also come down, which they have tremendously, believe me, from when we couldn't even do a dissolve. You had to go to an online house or even a lower third. Or what that little camera can do compared to our big $100,000 cameras. It was an exclusive club. But, you know, and some will just decide it's just too much. You got to be very thick-skinned, learn young, make sure you don't freak out when you find out you only have $10 in your bank account. If you can live through that, you're going to make it, because it's feast or famine. And you want to get to the point where there's a lot of feast, you know, where you're doing what you love to do, but yet you don't have to struggle as hard raising the money. You start to get known, and people will trust you, and they know that you're gonna pull it off. So many that start these projects and never finish them. Sometimes it's because of money, you know, they just couldn't raise that final goal.
Yeah.
Sometimes they just give up. You know, that's not good. But there's a lot of cats out there that are ready and willing, and man, I'm always amazed when I see them, and when they're real good, you know what I'm saying, and self-motivated and really want to make a difference. Whether it's art, it doesn't have to be political. You know, it could be artistic. It could be their vision. It could be a statement. It could be political. It could be environmental. Just a passion, a fervor that you got to have that keeps you going, rather than it's just a gig. And I pray to God the day that all this ridiculous and horrible reality TV crap is going to end. You know, it's just got to go. And it's really, I mean, it's unfortunate. A lot of my colleagues, you know, they hate it, but it pays, you know, money, and you know, but they hate it. You know, it's not as fulfilling as doing stories like Children of Giant, or Ancient Roads from Christ to Constantine that I just finished 6 hours. Took me all over the world. I mean, I was in Turkey, Israel three times, all over North Africa, Tunisia, you know, where they had that massacre.
Yeah.
And I was in Rome and Greece, all over, France, England, everywhere filming on Blu-ray. And the only country that gave me problems, believe it or not, the only one was France. They were the only ones, man. They popped me $2,000 because I took. It's because I had it on UK, so I had a small format camera, a Canon FX305, and you know, kind of looked space age. So you're going to sell it? I said, I'm not going to sell it. You got to pay $2,000 VAT tax right now. You can't come in. So they let me run around to the ATMs, right, in the airport, trying to gather up $2,000 because you're limited how much you can get, you know.
So you're running around the airport grabbing cat. That's wow. And you're doing a story about Jesus and the walk. That's you got to go through your own walk and punishment.
They don't care. They don't care.
Well, I appreciate the time. Thank you for coming back to Dallas. It's always a pleasure to have you up here. And I know Bart was really pushing this. He's known you forever, and he was like, you have to come up. You have to see this.
Well, I'm happy too, because at least I feel. You know, I did spend a time in the underside of a very, very bad part of Dallas. And that was for my film, The Dallas Drug War. Mm-hmm. And that was, what year was that? That was like in the mid-'90s, where I feared for my life. And I was doing news and public affairs a lot. I was a frontline. I did 11 front lines. And we spent a lot of time with crack dealers and crack deals and things going down, because it was destroying that community, which was South Dallas. Mm-hmm. At the time, I don't know how it's changed today, if at all. I'm sure it has. And then the city was at war with the police and the black community, and it was not pleasant to see. And it was tough doing that one, really tough. It was the Wild West with the Uzis and everything out in the street. I mean, there was a war going on, and it was every night, and it was scary, man. I don't think you were born yet.
No, I was a kid.
Yeah,
we didn't go that far down to Dallas.
And what was interesting, I started hanging around with a lot of the Muslims, and they're the ones that had patrols. At that time, they were called AA Man, and they would wear green T-shirts, and they'd all get together and go confront crack houses and start shouting and chanting, "You better run, drug dealer, better run. You better run, drug dealer," and then the whole community to run out these these drug dealers that were killing people, you know, and people getting addicted, rock stars. I mean, it was horrible.
Uh,
But that was an eye-opening experience, and the reason I picked Dallas is because Dallas was so innocent. I mean, Oakland, Philadelphia, New York, all those places had already been crack infested, but Dallas was wide open. And so it came here with a vengeance. And we were there, we captured it, and it was a story that aired nationally. And then I've come back to some really nice events to Dallas, but that one was a tough one.
oh.